Hi, everybody. Glad to have you back with us again. Today, I'm very excited. I'm introducing a dear friend of mine who's an amazing therapist. She's got a lot to say about chronic fatigue syndrome. You're going to learn a lot in this hour or so, next hour or so, because she's got so much to say. She's got so much to share. I'm, again, super excited to be sharing her. Her name's Jenny Lynn. Hey, Jenny.
Hiya.
I'm just going to give you a quick description of yourself. Jenny's a transpersonal therapist. She's a trainer, an author, a supervisor, and mentor, embracing the mental, emotional, and spiritual aspects of health and well-being. And she works with therapists, helping them grow and embody the changes they wish to see in their clients, clearing their fear so that they can walk their talk, so that they can become leaders of authenticity. And as a result of their continued mentoring with Jenny, many students of Jenny's open mind process, which you're going to hear about today, for treating CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, have developed highly authentic and successful careers in the disciplines of counseling, psychotherapy, and hypnotherapy. And so we have now
Wow.
Jenny Lynn, welcome. It's so good. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I'm very excited to be interviewing. I know you got so much to share, and I want to get this out to everybody. Since this is going to be such a jam-packed talk, let's actually quickly get into it, because I want to get everything as much as possible in.
Yeah.
But give the listeners here a quick background into who you are and how you got interested in chronic fatigue syndrome.
Okay. Well, basically, I was very new in practice, and as I've described to you before, Matt, because we go back a few years,
Yes.
that I was trained eclectically. So I was trained from the word go, integratively, with lots of different skills and talent, insights and training. And the idea was that instead of using techniques, we actually looked at the human being underneath. So all of the different styles and modalities that I learned was really targeting the individual underneath. So then we started to realize that it's not rocket science, but everyone is a unique individual, and the techniques are just a way of getting to the heart and core of that person. So the first time I met chronic fatigue, I was been in practice about 6 months. I didn't have a clue what to do with it. And in fact, when she came through for the first time, she was really quite angry. Oh, don't treat my chronic fatigue. I've been everywhere with it, and no one knows what to do. I've spent money on this, and I've spent money on that, and so I was grateful. I was really grateful she didn't want me to treat her chronic fatigue. But what I did treat was her anxiety, and as we peeled back the layers, and I worked really deeply with her, I realised that this profound anxiety that she had been with her all her life, from her youngest years, and it had become part of who she was. And so when she developed chronic fatigue in later life, it looked to her like it'd come from nowhere. But in fact, it was a habit that she developed over many, many years, and she was exhausted with anxiety and completely unconscious with it. So when I started working with her, she then went back to her doctor, said it was working really well. Her doctor then started referring a whole bunch of people to me with chronic fatigue. I started to get paid for that from our local National Health Service. They used to pay me to see their patients.
Wow.
So all of a sudden, I had a captive audience, really.
Yeah. Wow, that's so fascinating, because, yes, it's not rocket science, but you're talking about dealing with more of the human, the person behind the symptom, right? But I think a lot of what we learned in the field of therapy is so technique oriented. They forget the human side.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All the training I've had was a lot of technique, and it's so hard to use technique when you're when it's because technique is so it's so structured, right? And we don't live structured lives necessarily.
No.
Everybody's so vastly different.
No. Right? Yeah, and what works for one person doesn't work for another, and it goes on and on and on. So how do you tailor an approach that works for people that come to you for help? So instead of being a one-trick pony, you need to really understand the person, and then whatever stuff you have available, you fit to that person.
But here's the thing, right? So you're talking about the client that you had with chronic fatigue syndrome coming into your life, and that was fascinating because she didn't want to work on the CF, but you found some anxiety that you can work on. right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And as we know, like everything's connected in the subconscious mind anyhow. So
Yeah.
when you started working with her and she presented chronic fatigue syndrome, what were you thinking? Well, she didn't present it, but she had it, and she was presenting anxiety. What were you thinking as you started to work with her?
That's an interesting question. I had it in the back of my mind all the while I was working with her. Why is she so exhausted? And I just kept referring back to that unconsciously or subconsciously. It was always in the back of my mind. Why is she so exhausted? Why is she so fatigued? And every time I asked that question and we did a little bit more work and we dug a bit deeper and we looked at what had happened in her life and what kind of person she had become, this is a typical kind of profile, if you like, of somebody with chronic fatigue. They have to prove they're worthy to so many people. They have to go out there and show people that they really are good and honest and straightforward and conscientious. There's a lot of pressure on them that they place on themselves to be good and perfect for other people. And the more I started to dig and understand why this poor woman had developed that modus operandi, I started to understand why she was so fatigued, that this wasn't just about the 10 years she'd had chronic fatigue. This went back to her earliest experiences. So I think in the back of my mind, I was always thinking, why is she so tired? And on one of my writings I've done recently, while I've been talking about this, I did a lot of meditating and chanting because I practiced Buddhism, as you probably know. For
Yes.
30 odd years I've practiced. And I did a lot of reflecting, a lot of meditating, a lot of chanting, a lot of trying to really dig deep to understand what was going on with her. And, I started to realize that the body was closing down because it didn't know it couldn't engage anymore. It was too exhausted. But more than that, if you look at what babies do when they just, are very, very vulnerable and very young and they don't understand what's going on around them, they just go to sleep.
Mm. Oh yeah.
They sleep. Yeah. So you can't stress a baby because they just will tune out and they'll go to sleep.
So in essence, is that what's generally happening with people with chronic fatigue syndrome? There's just so much that's going on around with them. They just say, I can't take it. I'm just going to sleep.
Yes, but it's not a conscious thing. And this is where, chronic fatigue has this terrible history of it's all in the mind and they're just putting it on. And it totally isn't that. It's a totally unconscious disconnect between the mind and the body, that the body really desperately needs to have all the adrenaline wind down, the adrenals need to take a rest, everything needs to gear down. And the head is saying you can't afford to do that because you are the kind of person that has to prove everything to everybody else all the time. You depend upon it. That is where your sanity is. You have to prove to other people that you are valuable. So the head and the body have completely lost contact with each other. So the body, when it closes down and it goes to sleep, it's just doing what it has to do because it cannot keep up with the demands of the head.
Wow. But if the demands of the head are so strong, I guess they're strong enough to kind of override sometimes what the body's doing until the body eventually just says, I can't take it anymore. Because
Exactly, yeah.
because consciously they think they're doing the right thing, I imagine, right? Because they want to please everybody. But I guess there's a point to how long they can keep that going.
Exactly. And, the pressure on the system over a number of years, eventually it looks like it's the divorce or the flu or the glandular fever or whatever it is. It looks like something like Epstein-Barr virus, I think, was one of them.
Yes.
And there's a whole number of different causes of chronic fatigue, but those aren't the causes. They're just the effects of years and years and years of stress, unconscious stress on the immune system and on the adrenal system.
Now that's a good point, because I imagine, like with clients I've had, they're always looking, I can't take this, I can't stand what they do, but they're always looking toward that one event. What's that one thing that created this whole thing inside of me? If I can just clear that one thing, I'll be fine, right? But it's not like that at all, you're saying.
No. And you and I know, over many years of working in this world, that this elusive one cause is, we're never going to find it.
Yeah.
Very, very occasionally you'll find a direct link between a common day experience, a current day experience with an event in the past, but it's so unusual, I think, to make that causal link. And I think, you know, with chronic fatigue in particular, you're looking at an environment really where stress was normal.
Wow.
Where to stay safe, I had to keep watching what was going on around me. And I mean, you know, looking at some of the parental expectations of people with chronic fatigue, either, for example, you know, expectations are so high that young person couldn't reach those expectations ever. Because you do find a lot of very high achievers. They used to call it here yuppie flu in the UK, because very high achievers develop chronic fatigue. And of course, that's the worst possible thing for somebody who's a conscientious and a high achiever to get. You know,
Well,
how can I continue to prove that I'm worth anything if I've got chronic fatigue?
and it keeps going, because even after that parent dies and passes away, right, they might not have the pressures from their parents, but it's embedded inside of them now.
Yeah.
So they have expectations, high expectations of themselves to keep going. Right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, yeah. And so, you know, and if even if it's not the expectations of a parent, you might find a person from a challenging childhood who had to take responsibility for an alcoholic parent or something else that was going on. They had to take too much responsibility too young. What they do is they set up a lot of anxiety and a lot of hypervigilance in their life. They learn to watch and observe so that they keep safe.
Well, that's fascinating, because I've met so many therapists who are so burnt out, right? They just, they could only do this, a lot of them could only do this for maybe a few years, 5, 6 years, and all of a sudden they just burn out. Because they're so busy trying to, I guess, fix what's happening outside of them so that they can be looked at as that's something great. What would you say to a therapist like that?
Yeah. I mean, it's such a shame, because I think, you know, we come into this work and we really do want to do good and we really do want to help people. But until we've really profoundly helped ourselves, it's very difficult to do that on any sustainable basis, you know. So helping ourselves is understanding that we are not about to put our knickers on over our trousers, to use English words from your side. But you know, we can't do that. We have to actually walk our talk, which is what my whole thing is all about, really. It's walking your talk. It's actually being the change, as Gandhi would say, that you want to see in your clients. You know, it's being the change you want to see, rather than fixing other people so that you can feel good.
But how do you get somebody that's so caught up in their thoughts, so caught up in the way they've been brought up? I guess that's a part of the system you've created, because you know, again, everything about them is focusing outward, right? How do you get them inward to realize that they're doing a lot with themselves that they don't know they're doing? Yeah.
Well, one of the things I'm going to be teaching on this 5-step program is meditation. So the ability to become mindful of what's going on in your own psyche. Now, you know, coupled with hypnotherapy and with deeper, sort of more unconscious work, you start to become conscious of patterns that have gone back to your earliest years. So, you know, meditation or just mindfulness or closing your eyes and being aware of what runs through your head is a great way of trying to capture thoughts that would otherwise just be gone very quickly. So I don't know if that answers the question, because and the other thing was, you know, as a therapist, sitting with your client with chronic fatigue, you have to learn how to listen to what's not being said. Whether it be body language or patterns of behavior that you can hear from the language they use, or even just, you know, hand gestures or ways in which that person is. And the more you listen to what's not being said, the more you'll be able to reflect back an unconscious vibe that these people give out.
Can you give an example of something like that in regards to body language and what they're saying?
Yeah, let me have a think. Okay, I had a lady through, this wasn't ME, this was MS actually.
Okay.
But it was quite a significant aha moment for her. She came through about a year ago. She had MS. She was multiple sclerosis. She was very stiff in the morning. She could hardly stand or walk in the morning. And as the day went on, she got better. And listening to her, I remember she was telling me about her family, and she was telling me about her father, who she refused to talk to anymore. She had nothing to do with him. And there was lots of this going on. She was a very confident, very together lady. She looked like she had it all sorted. But she'd come through to me with anxiety and anger, and felt very uncomfortable in herself. That was what she was there for. But on the surface of it, she looked absolutely fine. But I reflected to, when I sat back and I sort of took in the impression of who she was, I thought, this woman's got so much anger inside her. She's really angry.
How did you catch that?
It was her way, it was the way she sat, it was the speed with which she spoke, it was some of the language she used about her father, it was the way she brushed things off as she spoke.
Right.
You know, there was a lot of clues about the way she was in the world that was right in front of me. And so, you know, I just reflected that back to her. I said, you look really angry. You really look unhappy and angry with your life. And it just cuts through. Yeah. The minute you start to absorb the feelings rather than trying to think, you know, I'm not sat there trying to work out what's going on for her. I'm just trying to think, or feel rather, what feeling do I get when I'm with this lady? And sometimes you can even visualize this feeling. And like when I was sat with her, I remember thinking, there's lots of spikes coming out this lady. It's like this very spiky energy.
Now you said, it's like you said, you sat there and said, what am I feeling about this lady? I guess that's where, like, the importance of doing your self work, because sometimes when you have a client in front of you, sometimes the feelings you're feeling could be actually your own feeling, or your own perception, right?
That's right.
So again, the importance of doing your own work.
That's right, because if you're not a clear tabula rasa, none of us are tabula rasas, but you know, if you're not absolutely clear what's being triggered in you, because the same lady might have upset me, for example. If I was feeling somewhere that her anger was directed at me, I might have been tippy-toeing around her thinking, oh, I better not upset this lady because she's got some anger going on. I would have known she was angry, but I would have responded differently. I would have responded from my patterns of behaviour instead of what she was presenting with. And so because I was clear, it was easy for me to challenge her and say, what's this anger?
Now, you know, sometimes you can see, like from our side, as a therapist side, you can see obviously some body language that will show anger. But that's the feeling that they're actually trying to run away from, and say they don't want to acknowledge it.
Yes.
So at times you could say, you look angry to me, and they'll almost kind of get very defensive, right?
Yeah.
And they'll say, what are you talking about? I'm not angry.
Yeah.
You know, with an angry voice. I'm not angry. What are you talking about? So how do you work around that?
That's interesting. Timing is everything. Yeah. So you really do have to build a fantastic rapport with somebody very quickly to be able to reflect back to them that they're displaying anger. Okay. So timing is really important. Wow. So I don't just muscle in there and say, "Oh, you look angry." Right. You know, I'm kind of building rapport. I'm looking, I'm working, I'm listening, I'm understanding, I'm feeling, I'm sensing, I'm doing all that stuff. And at the moment, when it seems the most opportune time to tell them, you tell them. If at that moment they say no, not at all, you say, "Okay, fine, fair enough," and I back off, right? Right. And then I just sit and watch, because I know what I've seen. They might just dispute it, but I know what I've seen, okay? And I then back off and I let them carry on doing whatever it is they're doing. And there'll be another opportunity, always, in the same conversation where they show that anger again.
You know, I think there tends to be a challenge with some therapy work out there. Like if a feeling comes up with a client, there's a feeling like I got to jump on that feeling now, and I've got to expose that feeling now. But I think what people need to understand, what therapists need to understand, is that if their body language is showing a particular emotion, that's their subconscious mind that's actually exposing that emotion. Yeah. And that you're going to get another opportunity Another
Yes.
right? Another opportunity can come up where you can slip in it because I think they get scared, like, oh my God, I lost the opportunity. It'll never come up again.
Yeah, you're quite right. The body's speaking, the body's talking all of the time. So, and this is a thing with ME or chronic fatigue, is it's speaking all of the time. You just have to tune in to what it's saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, you know, watching body language and being safe and comfortable in your skin to work with that unpredictable. You can't sort of structure it. You can't predict it. You don't know what's going to happen next. And the problem with technicians is, of course, they want everything, you know, sewed up and you know, predictable, and it can't be. So sitting there in your uncomfortable comfort, you know, and being able to just reflect what's going on. I mean, it's not my responsibility. I can't fix them. Yeah. All I can do is show them what they're doing that's upsetting themselves.
Right.
That's, you know, I can't fix them. And this is the difference between people like you say who become part of the problem if they take it on. Yeah, if they try and fix them. It's just that capacity to sit with them and show them how you live. It's almost like, you know, I read recently Richard Rohr, R-O-H-R. He's an American Franciscan Catholic priest. Amazing guy. I'm a Buddhist of 30 years. This guy's a, you know, Catholic priest. And he says, transformed people tend to transform people. Because, so the energy that a therapist gives off when they're living and working in authenticity is enough for your client to start to change.
Wow, because they can feel that authenticity.
They feel it, they know it, they trust it. Whereas if you're just a suit of bugger all delivering techniques,
right,
you're not going to get the same influence as though...
That tends to create a wall, I think, in between you and the client, right?
Yeah.
They can definitely feel it. And I guess that's part of the rapport, right? If they can feel that inside of you.
Yeah.
You can get straight to the heart.
Yeah.
Now, I know that in the past, you've had other types of programs, and now you have this new 5-step system. What's the difference between what you offer in the past and what you're offering now?
Yeah. Well, in the past, I used to offer these 3-day bonanza workshops on chronic fatigue syndrome, and when I first started to offer it, I didn't realise that my colleagues didn't have this psychological underpinning. I didn't realise they were just technicians. I thought, because I'd come through that whole process, that everyone would have the same kinds of insights and awareness that I had, which is why I was so damn nervous when I first launched my chronic fatigue course, because I thought, what can I teach these people? They're therapists. You know, they must have the insight that I have. But as I realised they didn't, I lengthened the course from a 2 to 3 days and incorporated counselling and psychotherapy skills and a lot of personal work. And when I taught, for example, counselling skills, I taught a whole lot. I taught all 30 skills. I think there's 3 stages of integrative counselling according to a guy called Gerard Egan, and it's a very challenging model. It's a very sort of coaching style model. But I taught the whole lot. And, you know, I really put my heart and soul into it. And did they really need to know all that? There was a lot of stuff they didn't really need to know. What they needed to know was how to look deeply into the lives of their clients, and how to do some personal work of their own that wasn't going to, you know, that was going to cause them not to be so anxious with clients. That's what they really needed to learn. So with the 5-step system, I've kind of edited it down to the really targeted ways in which you can work with people with chronic fatigue, or with anyone, because as you know, Mark, once you work with that level of unconscious, you know, the unconscious level, you start to be able to work with anyone. Yeah. You know, this kind of way of looking into the lives of people is not restricted to just people with chronic fatigue. But if you want to build a niche for yourself, obviously, in chronic fatigue, and you want to be one of those people that just gets it and knows how to work with it, then of course this course is exactly for that.
Now, in your course, will you have ways to show people how to attract clients with chronic fatigue?
Yes, I can do. I haven't got a specific module for that, but the thing is, I've got a secret Facebook page. Let me see, I've got them all written down somewhere. So the whole course has got 9 hours of audio recordings. It's got handouts and personal development sheets, transcripts, and a secret Facebook group for question and answer. Okay. Now, I've been online for many, many years, you know, attracting clients and working successfully with chronic fatigue. So I'm quite happy to share all of that in my question and answer on Facebook. So if people want to know how to, you know, how to work that way, then that's part of, you know, part of the question and answer group on the secret Facebook group that I can offer that there. So yeah, so the point of the whole program, this is an audio program, so it's available to anyone around the world. And the point of this is that I'm, you know, I want to share this information with more people that can make it to London.
That can't make it to London.
Yeah. That can't make it to London. So I want to make sure that this work gets out there to as many people as possible, a bit like your TPA, but just so that I have the opportunity to help my therapist colleagues develop in every which way they can to be the best they can for their clients. So that's what I want. That's my goal, really.
Okay, so you have 9 hours. Is that 9 hours of audio? Is that correct?
Yeah, 9 hours of audio recordings. Yeah, which is, as you know, over a day's training.
Yes, for sure. But they also have access to you.
Yes.
For questions if it goes beyond.
Yes.
You know. Okay.
Yeah. And they'll also be expected to do one self-reflective case study. Okay. Now, this might scare some people away. They don't, you don't have to do it, okay? But I would advise that you do it, because the self-reflective case study is an opportunity for you to see your stuff, to see what you're bringing.
Well, that's again, that is just so important. You really have to do your own work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think, you know, I think to me, the more you do your work, the more you release your own stuff, the more that your own limited voices will stop coming into play, right? I can't tell you how many therapists I've met where they just, God, they just don't feel worthy enough to help somebody else.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you've got to be able to clear some of that stuff out.
Absolutely, yeah. So, you know, a self-reflective case study is actually using a client, any client that you want to work with, whether it be chronic fatigue or somebody else, but using a client to explore your inner world. The client doesn't need to know that you're writing about them.
Yeah.
But if you choose a client that you have a reaction to, or you don't like, or you don't understand, or you're stuck with, I want to see a self-reflective case study.
Yeah.
Because that is your opportunity, or people's opportunity, to really understand what is standing in their way and where it comes from. Now, I give some really clear guidance on how to write that case study, but the case study is not for me. It's not an academic thing. I'm not interested in it all being word perfect. It's not, you know, it shouldn't put people off who don't know how to write. It's really just for you to explore.
Right.
What kind of stuff comes up? You know, it's almost like journaling, but it's a little bit more structured than journaling. Okay.
Let me just go back real quick. So,
sure.
In regards to, you know, I always say you have to balance everything out, right? I mean, if you talk to a baker, he's going to want to bake. You talk to a surgeon, he's going to want to cut. You talk to most hypnotherapists or most therapists, it's going to say it's all in the mind. When in actuality, all those points are valid. We have to look at all kinds of different ways of looking at it. And so many times I find therapists, they say, oh, it's all in your subconscious mind. Everything's about your subconscious mind. It's only your subconscious mind. When I say, yeah, but you got to use your willpower mind also in other parts of your life, like physical exercise and nutrition. You've got to be able to add that to the whole round of things. And, you know, even spirituality, if you may. But let's talk about the nutrition in regards to what kinds of food may help somebody suffering with chronic fatigue syndrome.
Yeah, I think by the time somebody's developed chronic fatigue, they're pretty toxic. The whole body's pretty toxic, really, because everything they put into their body is either stressing their body or providing energy.
Yeah.
And what we don't realise in our modern diet, you know, our modern diet is full of sugar. It's loaded with wheat. It's loaded with milk products. Sugar. There's lots of sugar. There's lots of stuff that our modern diet is loaded with. And if you're not aware that that's causing a problem, it's actually depleting your energy. If you're not aware of that, then you're just going to carry on doing that stuff, you know.
Which in turn makes it more difficult to actually look inside of yourself to do even more work.
Yeah, because you haven't got the you just haven't got the clarity. A lot of people with chronic fatigue have skin problems, they have digestive problems, and this is because the whole system is slowing down. The whole system's not working properly. Yeah. So you're going to be quite stressed in so many ways, and getting major contaminants out of your diet is the first thing that you can do. Now, a lot of people with chronic fatigue say, how on earth can I do that when I'm so tired? I've got to pay attention to my diet. And I think, well, make a choice. Make a choice. If you have any energy every day, spend it getting well. Yeah. Spend it looking after yourself. The problem with chronic fatigue is they're not used to doing that. They look after other people.
Right.
You see, this is quite a turnaround, to stop looking after other people and start looking after yourself. It's quite selfish. But, hopefully with a new mindset, as you start working on the underlying issues and start, making that one-to-one contact with people, they start to realize they have to do that for themselves. They have to, whichever way that works best for them, they have to. And, one of the things they hate more than anything, and, I've treated many people with chronic fatigue, is this idea of, which is a buzzword in, modern medical treatment of it, which is graded exercise and pacing. So graded exercise, pacing. Pacing is where, if you've only got so much energy, just use a little bit every day. But, the chronic fatigue can't do that. They've either got loads of energy or they've got none. So they get very angry at the idea that they have to pace themselves. It sounds very indulgent for them and very selfish.
Let me back you up on that a little bit. So with chronic fatigue syndrome, you actually have a lot of energy or you have none? Is that correct?
Yes. What happens is they'll have a period of a week or more where they're completely knackered. And the advice is to rest, because rest actually makes them feel better. Yeah. And then the minute they get better, that's it. They have to catch up with everything they couldn't do for the previous week. So I call it boom bust, like they're either on all cylinders firing, or they're on nothing. Yeah. And popular advice is to pace. Now, unless you get into the subconscious mind and understand why people behave that way, there's no way they're going to pace. They're not going to pace. They don't understand the benefits of it. Yeah. The same with graded exercise. Graded exercise, when I last looked at some statistics a few years ago, actually made people feel worse, not better, because the underlying person that they are doesn't understand. It's like they're not being understood. Yeah, give me graded exercise. Well, what's that going to do? It's like a technique. It's an external, it's an external something. You don't understand me.
Right. Oh.
So. Yeah.
Is that that like there? You don't understand me. Is that some underlying subconscious pattern that goes on with people with chronic fatigue? They really just want to be understood. Is that why they put out so much energy?
Yeah. Yeah. One of my clients many years ago helped me write the nutrition part of my course, because she was a nutritionist and she was a recovering chronic fatiguer, and she wrote a poem that I can't pull up immediately right to here, but it's a very brief poem, and it was so emotional. Every single time I've ever read it, it was just emotional. Very brief, just a few lines, but one of the lines was, "I have forgotten to be me."
Wow.
Yeah, I've forgotten to be me, or I've forgotten how to be me. And so, in search of themselves, they go out looking for me. And ME is the English term, myalgic encephalomyelitis is the English term for chronic fatigue syndrome.
Oh, fascinating.
Yeah.
Okay, and then that also makes them resentful, I imagine, because they're putting out so much energy for everybody else, and they expect that in return. But when they don't get that in return.
Yeah, that can happen. And also, you'll find some of them feel so misunderstood and so misrepresented by mainstream approaches, by medicine, and the whole CBT, graded exercise and pacing prescription that they're given, that they get very, very angry with the clinicians. And there are hate campaigns around the world, towards certain clinicians who are saying this is all in the mind. Certain or certain clinicians who won't identify the physical aspects of the disease, or won't identify. Do you know what I mean? There are certain people that place themselves in the either it's physical or it's the mental boot camp, and you know, never the twain shall meet. Now this is ridiculous. And the thing is, you know, modern medicine, the way it's developed, it has separated the mind from the body, and it's made it incredibly difficult for us to understand the whole human being.
Right. Right.
You know, so the militant part of the ME community is really angry. They feel very neglected by medicine. But of course they would, because medicine doesn't involve the whole person. It doesn't involve, by definition, it doesn't involve the spirit, the soul, the heart, whatever it is you want to call it. It's just looking at the symptoms. So
yeah, it's so funny. It's like you're trying to treat this whole body through a symptom, and it just doesn't make any sense, right? I mean,
no,
you know, you may be able to take care of that one system, but then you got 1,000 other symptoms, right?
Yeah,
and then now you're chasing the symptoms. You never treat the person as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And the irony is, if you actually take the symptom as what it is, just a signpost to the soul, and you treat the person, then all the symptoms go. You know, but when you treat the symptom, it's all back to front. It's round the wrong way. You'll be forever treating symptoms. You push one down, another one will come up.
Well, that's like what I say about technique versus concept, right? A lot of therapists will learn technique, right? And you can, and because it's technique, the techniques usually only take care of the symptoms, right? But if you learn the concept as a whole and try to figure out what you're doing, you'll come up with 1,000 different techniques that will match what you need for that particular moment in that particular time, instead of trying to force that technique into that one moment.
Yeah, and that's your that's your freedom to be creative, and you're creative when you feel, and to coin a term that you use, when you're at peace. That's when you're most creative, is when you're at one with yourself, and you accept all your dark places as well as your light places, and you understand that you're only human.
Yeah. Let me talk about that real quick. I just got to get a point that's because when I talk about peace, a lot of people look at me like, peace is this. I go, no, peace is power. You know, when you're inside of peace, you could actually use your inspired in action. You could use your intuition to start moving your life and creating your life. It's not something you sit back. Peace is not just sitting back and going, no. I mean, if you look at people like Gandhi, right? I mean, they had a sense of inner peace about them, but they were very active. They followed their intuition. They went out there and became active. You know, and they pushed themselves. And like you said, what was that line you said by Mr. Rohr? Transform.
People tend to transform people.
Right.
Yeah.
And honestly, I think most people are looking for is that sense of peace, because they're so befuddled by everything else around them, like chronic fatigue syndrome. They can't get the right answers, right?
Yeah. The answers. Every single patient with chronic fatigue has their own answers. Now that for them is like blasphemous. And you know, if this video goes out and we get a whole bunch of people saying, "How dare you say that?" Then you know, I won't be surprised. But seriously, the answers to these diseases are within each and every person, and it's for us to signpost it for them.
Yeah.
We can't be them, we can't rescue them, we can't save them from themselves, but we can show them in our energy field. Another thing that Richard Rohr says is, if you don't transform it, you transmit it.
Wow, I like that.
So, you know, and we have to model and show how to be peaceful. We have to be authentic as therapists if we're gonna treat the most difficult cases around.
And that's been your MO for the longest time. You've been trying so hard to get people to work their own stuff so that they can work with other people. Right?
Yeah.
Jenny, I could sit here and talk to you forever, right? And we can just keep going on and on. But real quickly, what are some of the requirements that are needed for people to join your course?
Right, what do they need to do? They need to be in practice. They need to have a heart. And they need to want to do some personal work as well as professional work. So, you know, I cannot give a bunch of techniques and guarantee they will work, because that's not how I work. But I can signpost to you where you need to do the work, and not you, Matt, but, you know, I can signpost to them where they need to do the work and then show them how to get there.
Yeah.
Yeah? I can model it for them. I can demonstrate how to get there. Yeah. So the 5 steps, the very first lesson I teach.
Give us an outline, if you would, of the 5 steps.
Yeah, the 5 steps. Well, the very first week I teach is basically the history, the science, the whole thing around chronic fatigue, so that people have a context. It's no good me teaching all these lovely systems if people don't know what they're looking for. So I give the full in-depth context of what it is, where it's come from, what to look for, the backgrounds, case studies. I'll show everything in that first week. And then the first step is assessment. It's learning how to sit with your client and assess what's going on for them. It's doing this whole unfocused listening. It's using a couple of targeted counselling skills to just unravel the puzzle. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think step 2 is actually teaching more about those targeted, how to target the unconscious stuff without hypnosis. So this is just understanding what kind of signals to watch for, who they are, you know, looking at their past, where they've come from. So it's bigger. It's unpacking. Stage 2 is bigger. Stage 3 or step 3 is actually how to use hypnotherapy. So if I've got people coming on this course who have never used hypnotherapy, I'm going to show them how to do some hypnosis.
Okay. Good.
So it will be very targeted, very specific types of hypnosis.
In my mind, I know a lot of psychologists who never studied hypnotherapy, right?
Yeah.
That's a great module there for them to learn.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And if they even if they have studied hypnotherapy, my stuff is like you. It's very engaging. It's not technique based. It's concept based, like you've just said. It's about, okay, this is a presenting issue. This is the underlying issue. I wonder what we can create today.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So it's being creative with hypnosis. And then step 4 is looking at the nutritional, the physical, and all of the physical aspects of chronic fatigue and the advice and guidance that you need to give your clients to help them on that level. And then step 5 is bringing it all together, and it's doing some deep work on the therapist's ability to stay calm and to find their own peace. Because without fail, I can guarantee people with chronic fatigue will go have a fantastic high and then they'll really drop. And you know, what happens then with a therapist is they go, great high, oh, it's all done, and then they drop, and you think, oh God, I've failed. Yeah. You haven't failed. It's part of the process. Yeah? Yeah. So the therapist needs to learn how to stand really steady with that. Yeah. And be the guide that their clients need.
Yeah. And you know, when clients go through that up and down, I always just tell them, I go, look, you're just recalibrating. You're trying to find that middle ground to find out where that center of peace is for you, so you can incorporate all of your experiences and expectations together. Yeah. Wow. Well, that definitely sounds like a complete program. I mean, and if you're out there listening to us, you definitely should look into it. How would they find out more information?
Well, they need to go to my site. If you go on to theopenmindtherapist.com, second tab in, working with Jenny, drop-down menu is the audio program for chronic fatigue syndrome. So that's the one that I'm going to be launching. We start on the 19th of March, so we've got a few weeks yet before we launch. So that's how they can get in touch with me.
Okay, excellent. Real quickly, I just want to encapsulate this entire thing, because there's a few things that I got out of this conversation that I think with people with chronic fatigue syndrome have. One, they're people pleasers, right?
Yeah.
2, which tends to move them away from who they are inside.
Yep.
Right. 3, because they tend to go up and down quite a bit, they don't pay too much to their nutrition. It's hard for them to pay too much to their nutrition, because they're still, again, either trying to fix somebody or getting hurt because the people out there that they're looking to help them don't give them the answers. Right?
That's right. Yeah.
Western medicine. Is there anything you can add to any of that?
I think you've summed it up rather nicely. You're 10 out of 10 for listening.
Oh, well, very good. Excellent. Well, Jenny, thank you very much, and I think this has been very helpful. And I do hope all you out there listening to this really go check out Open Mind Therapist. I'll put a link down below underneath this, and and you guys can check it out because find out a lot more. She's got so much more. Just what we touched on today. That's just a touch of what Jenny knows, and she's got so much to share. And
Great.
thank you, Jenny, and I look
Thank you,
forward to
Herb.
talking to you again.
It's lovely.